Imagine waking up in the year 1050 AD. You are standing on the banks of a great river in North America, and in front of you is a city. Not a village, not a camp, a real city, with massive pyramids, busy markets, tens of thousands of people, and a skyline that would shock you. This city was larger than London, larger than Paris, and yes, larger than Rome at its peak. And yet, today, almost no one knows its name. This is the story of Cahokia, the greatest city in ancient North America that simply vanished. To understand Cahokia, we need to go back about 1,000 years. The year is around 1050 AD. In Europe, the Middle Ages are in full swing. Knights, castles, the Catholic Church controls everything. But on the other side of the world, in what is today the state of Illinois in the United States, something extraordinary is happening. A civilization is rising. The people we now call the Mississippians have been living along the great rivers of North America for centuries. But around this time, something changes. They begin to build, and they don't build small. At the center of their world, they construct a city that will become the heartbeat of an entire continent. They call it Cahokia. At its height, this city is home to an estimated 20,000 people. To put that in perspective, the city of London at the same time had around 15,000 people. Paris had about 20,000. Cahokia was equal to the greatest cities of medieval Europe. And this was in North America, a place most people assume had no advanced civilizations at this time. They were wrong. Now let's talk about what Cahokia actually looked like, because this is where things get truly astonishing. At the center of the city stood a structure so massive it still exists today. It is called Monk's Mound. This is a pyramid, not made of stone like the Egyptian pyramids, but made entirely of earth. And it is enormous. Monk's Mound covers an area larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza. It rises 30 meters into the sky, built in layers over generations. At its top stood a massive wooden building, almost certainly the home or temple of the city's ruler. When you stood at the base of Monk's Mound and looked up, you understood immediately that you were in the presence of power. But Monk's Mound was just the beginning. Surrounding it was a grand plaza, carefully leveled and maintained. Around the plaza, more than 120 smaller mounds, each serving a different purpose. Some were temples, some were burial sites, some were platforms for the homes of the elite. The city was surrounded by a massive wooden wall, a stockade, stretching for nearly 3 kilometers. This was not just a settlement. This was a planned city, with architecture, with hierarchy, with intention. And at its peak, the streets would have been filled with life. Traders arriving from hundreds of kilometers away, bringing copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf of Mexico, mica from the Appalachian Mountains. Cahokia was not isolated. It was the center of a vast trading network, connected to civilizations across the entire continent. But here is where the story gets strange, because despite everything we know about Cahokia, there is so much we don't know. The Mississippian people left no written language, so everything we know about them, we have pieced together from archaeology alone. And what the archaeologists have found raises more questions than answers. Let's start with one of the most disturbing discoveries ever made at Cahokia. In 1967, archaeologists excavating one of the mounds found something unexpected: a mass burial. 53 young women, buried together, with almost no possessions. All of them appeared to have been sacrificed. Who were they? Why were they killed? What ritual demanded their deaths? We don't know. We may never know. Then there is the mystery of Woodhenge. Near the city, archaeologists discovered a series of large wooden posts arranged in precise circles. When they analyzed the positions of these posts, they realized something incredible. The posts were aligned with the rising sun on the solstices and equinoxes. This was a calendar, a massive, carefully engineered calendar. The people of Cahokia were tracking the movements of the sun with extraordinary precision. But why? For agriculture? For religious ceremonies? For something else entirely? Again, we don't know. And perhaps the greatest mystery of all is what they believed. What gods did they worship? What stories did they tell their children? What did they think happened after death? We have fragments, symbols carved into objects, images on pottery, but the full picture is lost forever. Now we come to the part of the story that haunts every historian who studies Cahokia, the fall. Because by the year 1350 AD, just 300 years after the city reached its peak, Cahokia was empty, not conquered, not burned to the ground by an invading army, just abandoned. The people were gone, and for centuries, the mounds sat in silence, slowly being reclaimed by nature. So what happened? Archaeologists and historians have proposed several theories. The first is environmental collapse. Evidence suggests that the region experienced severe flooding in the 1100s. The Mississippi River, which was Cahokia's greatest asset, may have become its greatest threat. Floodwaters could have destroyed crops, contaminated water supplies, and made the city increasingly difficult to sustain. The second theory is deforestation. To build a city of 20,000 people, you need an enormous amount of wood. For houses, for the stockade walls, for fuel, for the wooden posts of Woodhenge. Studies of the landscape suggest that the forests around Cahokia were heavily depleted. Without trees, the soil erodes. The land becomes less fertile. The resources that the city depended on begin to disappear. The third theory is political collapse. Cities of this size require complex political systems to hold them together. Evidence suggests that the rulers of Cahokia exercised enormous power, possibly through fear and religious authority. But systems built on fear are fragile. If the ruling class lost its legitimacy, if the people stopped believing, the entire structure could unravel surprisingly quickly. And the fourth theory, which many researchers now believe, is that it was all of these things together. A perfect storm. Environmental stress, resource depletion, political instability, each one making the others worse, until the city simply could not survive. Here is something that makes the story of Cahokia even more tragic. When European explorers arrived in North America centuries later, they found the mounds. They could see that something enormous had once existed here. But the Native American peoples they encountered had no memory of who built them. The knowledge had been lost. For a long time, Europeans refused to believe that Native Americans could have built something so impressive. They invented wild theories. Some said the mounds were built by a lost tribe of Israel. Others claimed they were the work of ancient Egyptians, or Vikings, or even aliens. It took generations of careful archaeological work to establish the truth. Cahokia was built by the ancestors of the Native American peoples of North America. Full stop. No aliens, no lost Europeans, just human beings, with vision, with organization, and with the will to build something magnificent. And the fact that their story was ignored for so long is perhaps the saddest part of all. So why does Cahokia matter today? Because it forces us to rethink everything we think we know about history. We are taught that civilization, real civilization, began in the Middle East, spread to Europe, and then was brought to the rest of the world. Cahokia proves that story is incomplete. Human beings, across the globe, independently developed complex societies, trade networks, architecture, religion, and political systems. The capacity for civilization is not the property of any one culture or race. It is a human capacity. And Cahokia also serves as a warning. A civilization of 20,000 people with complex trade networks, sophisticated architecture, and centuries of accumulated knowledge can disappear. Not because of an asteroid, not because of a foreign invasion, but because of the slow accumulation of bad decisions, environmental neglect, and political fragility. The people of Cahokia did not know their city would be abandoned within 300 years. They thought they were building something permanent. They were wrong. And perhaps that is the most important lesson Cahokia has to offer. The Mounds of Cahokia still exist today. You can visit them in Illinois, just across the river from St. Louis. And if you stand at the top of Monk's Mound and look out across the landscape, you can almost feel the ghost of the city that once stood here. 20,000 people, living, breathing, building, believing, and then gone. If you want to learn more about the forgotten civilizations that shaped our world, subscribe, because we are just getting started.